Hello, my name is Udi LEDERGOR. I'm the chairman of the Association of Israeli Gay Fathers. I'm here to talk to you today about gay rights in Israel. I'll be talking about gay rights, how we achieve them, what our next battles are, and I hope to give you some insights on what's going on in Israel on the battle of LGBT rights. So the first right that I'm often asked about is the right to marry. Surprisingly, civilian marriage is not an option in Israel. All marriages and divorces, for that matter of fact, are related to the Rabbanut, the High Jewish Court, which means that only a straight couple, both of which are Jewish, can get married legally in Israel. There are separate courts for marrying Muslims and Christians, again, only straight couples. Unfortunately, same-sex couples cannot get married in Israel. The option that we do have is to get married in any other country where our marriage is legally binding, for example, the United States or Canada, which make it rather easy for foreign couples to come and marry in. And once we come back to Israel, we can register our marriage. Our marriage is then recognized in most government authorities, but not in all. I'll be touching on some of those where there are still problematic areas later on. It is important to say that there is a Supreme Court petition these days, which could take months or years to resolve, where we are calling for gay marriage and civilian marriage in Israel. It's too early to say how that will pan out, but for the last 65 years, the religious authorities in Israel have had a strong hold on the marriage institution, and they have no intent of letting it go, so it could still be many, many years before civilian marriage in general and gay marriage or same-sex marriage in particular are legally recognized in Israel. The next thing is adoption, and I'm talking now about same-sex couples or singles who want to adopt children who are not biologically related to them. Unfortunately, that's only a theoretical option in Israel. LGBT single people and couples are not allowed, in effect, to adopt non-biologically related children in Israel or abroad. Due to a different set of rules. To make it very simple, in Israel, straight couples always get first priority on adopting children who need a family. Gays, even though they were married abroad, their marriage is not recognized in Israel for the purpose of the adoption laws. So unfortunately, we're always pushed to the bottom of the line, which means it is very, very rare for a gay family, even if they're married abroad, to receive a child for adoption, and in most cases that will be a relatively older child, usually with a very difficult background that he's coming from, and most families would not choose to start their family that way. Adopting children abroad is also not an option for us because international adoption in Israel is only allowed through two dedicated non-profits, and unfortunately those two non-profits are only working on adopting children from Russia and Ukraine, which, as you may know, do not allow single men and women or same-sex couples to adopt. Therefore, in Israel, international adoption of LGBTs is, in effect, impossible as well. The next item I'd like to touch on is artificial insemination, or the popular way for lesbian, bisexual women to get pregnant either when they're single or in a same-sex couple. That is not a problem in Israel. Actually, any woman, whether single or married, regardless of her sexual orientation, may receive a sperm donation, and with the help of a doctor, usually relatively easily gets pregnant and can then have her baby. Once the baby is born, the non-biological mother, if there is one, may adopt the child. This process takes several months today. It's much easier than it used to be. It used to take several years. Now it's only several months. And there is a Supreme Court petition to shorten that into an automatic filling out of a form, which means that the baby will be recognized as belonging to both mothers immediately after their birth. We're optimistic in hoping that that will pan out later this year. As far as assisted procreation or fertility treatments, in Israel only women are entitled to fertility treatments related to surrogacy, egg donations, and all of that area of fertility treatments. So unfortunately, men cannot get the help of surrogate in Israel, and we cannot get fertility treatments that are related to surrogacy in Israel. Israel was in fact the first country 20 years ago, the first country to enact a surrogacy bill in its state, which means that surrogacy has been legal since 1996, unfortunately only for non-same-sex couples. That means you have to be a couple. You cannot be a single woman, nor a single man, nor a same-sex couple. You have to be a couple consisting of a man and a woman to be entitled to get the help of a surrogate in Israel. There have been several hundred cases of surrogacy in Israel, many of them successful. Unfortunately, they are still not made approachable for single women, single men, or same-sex couples. In recent years, there's been an attempt to change the law so single men, women, and same-sex couples would be able to get the help of a surrogate if they need her in Israel. Those attempts have not succeeded to date. The Israeli Association of Gay Fathers, along with other agencies, singles and couples, have filed to the Supreme Court to change that law. And we're waiting for a ruling later this year. We're very optimistic that after 20 years of the law, and this being the third time that the law is being challenged in the Supreme Court, the judges will rule in our favor and allow single men and same-sex couples and single women to get the help of surrogates in Israel if they need them. As far as children born through surrogacy abroad, so there are several countries today in the world, none of them in Europe, unfortunately, who allow surrogacy. United States, surrogacy is legal in most of the states. Some are more friendlier than others as far as the legal infrastructure. Canada, surrogacy is allowed in much of Canada. Those are pretty much the main options today. There are some Far East options like Cambodia, which are still quite experimental. Other options which were allowed in the past, like India, Nepal, and Thailand and Mexico, have all but closed down, either altogether or for foreigners or for same-sex couples. So many Israelis opt for surrogacy abroad. I'm talking now specifically same-sex couples and single fathers. I estimate that between 100 to 200 a year go abroad, most recently to the United States or Canada, to get the help of a surrogate to start their family. I myself am married to my same-sex partner, Guy, and over the course of the last 5 years, we've gone through 2 surrogacy processes, both in the United States, who have resulted in the birth of our 3 beautiful children, Tom, Adam, and Noah. The last main area of rights or lack thereof that I'd like to address are transgender rights. Transgender rights, for the most part, are not explicitly given in any laws in Israel. It is always a court battle to receive any rights. They are not well protected, neither in the workplace nor in the public domain, and there's a lot of work to do on protecting transgender rights. There is a process governed by the Ministry of Health for allowing sex reassignment surgery. The process for receiving approval to go through that process in Israel has been changed for the better in the last couple of years with the help of our recent Minister of Health, Yael and her staff. There's still a lot of work to do there, and transgender people in Israel, and I believe in most parts of the world, are still the group most denied of their rights, who find it really the most difficult to get along within the LGBT community, and that needs to change. Luckily, in the last couple of years, we've seen many in the LGBT community who are not part of the transgender community call out to grant transgenders equal rights and are working actively to make sure that that happens. Our last Pride, just earlier this month, marked transgender rights and equality this year in Israel. So hopefully we're seeing the beginning of a change there. I mentioned this in passing earlier, but I think it's worth dwelling on for a moment. Laws in our book of laws granting explicit rights to the LGBT communities are very few and far between. I think in the last 10 years, I can't even recall one significant law that passed that gave us equal rights or improved our status in Israel. All of the major battles in recent years can be marked to individuals and organizations within the LGBT community who went to the courts and battled them until we won specific cases or principal cases. There are many such battles currently being fought in the courts. Unfortunately, in all of recent years, the religious and the ultra-Orthodox religious parties have been a major part in the government coalitions, and they have been actively stopping any attempts to grant equal rights to the LGBT community members. It's a very, very difficult political situation. Our governments and our parliament are very fragmented amongst left-wing, center, and right-wing political parties, and other than one government, the last one, not the current one, who managed to form a coalition without the ultra-Orthodox parties. All of the governments in the last 20 years have had ultra-Orthodox parties as part of them, and they had to be promised that the status quo on many religious-related topics and controversial topics would be kept in order for them to be part of that coalition. And LGBT rights have suffered immensely because of those coalitions and have not been advanced by law in any material way. A question that I'm asked is, do we have any sorts of cooperation with Palestinian LGBT or human rights organizations? Well, the small organization that I'm part of, the Association of Gay Fathers, we have no relation with Palestinian organizations. I'm not aware that they have an organization for gay fathers. I doubt that they would. It's a rather new organization in Israel that we founded only 3 years ago. I know that other LGBT task forces in Israel, like the Aguda, which is our main LGBT task force, they do have relationships, working relationships, trying to help Palestinian organizations. Unfortunately, the Palestinians really need to fight for their existence. If they're LGBTs, they usually cannot be openly gay, unlike the situation in most of Israel, where we have hundreds of thousands of openly gay people today. So that is definitely a human rights problem that needs addressing. Human rights are a problem in the Palestinian authorities altogether, and LGBT rights in particular are a problem. We've heard many cases of cruelty against them. Usually they get kicked out of their home and their villages, and many of them end up in Israel or in other countries seeking asylum. One more topic that I'd like to address today is the recent Pride parade in Tel Aviv. So about a month or two before the parade, the Ministry of Tourism in Israel announced that it would be investing 11 million shekels, that's approximately 2 million euros, in a tourist campaign to bring European and other foreign tourists to Israel for Tel Aviv Pride. And that initiative was met with highly controversial mixed results. On the one hand, many of us were happy that Ministry of Tourism is recognizing the power, the economic power of the LGBT community in Israel, and is working to bring tourists to Gay Pride to show what a wonderful city we have here, and one of the biggest Pride parades in the world. More than 100,000 people attended our last Pride parade just a few weeks ago. On the other hand, there was a lot of criticism that this attempt is what we call pinkwashing, which is basically trying to hide a lot of the human rights issues in Israel in general towards the Palestinians and other societies, and specifically the lack of law-given LGBT rights. As I mentioned, most of our rights in recent years were fought in the courts, and the governments have done very little, if at all, to provide us with any rights in recent years. And so there was an outcry, and a justified outcry to the government saying, you cannot keep boasting what a wonderful place Tel Aviv is for gay rights. You cannot take credit for this and spend money on bringing tourists to see what a wonderful city we have with gay rights when you did nothing to provide those gay rights. And fortunately, that outcry resulted, first of all, in making the tourist campaign smaller than it was originally planned to be, as far as we know. And also, it started a first-of-its-kind dialogue with the government treasury, dialogue that I'm happy and privileged to be part of, where we're now talking to them about receiving budgets much, much larger than we had ever received before for the LGBT members of the community, for the LGBT organizations. Organizations like ours are not funded at all. We rely on membership fees and very small donations that we manage to gather and scrap together from here and there. We are all underfunded. We are mostly volunteers working part-time or full-time, trying to realize the goals of our organizations. But it's very, very difficult to move forward like that. And I'm glad that the outcry just before the last Pride Parade really started this dialogue under pressure. And now the Minister of Finance is working with us and his team to really pour millions of shekels in the next 3 years, starting immediately this year, and helping the organizations and individuals in our community get the support, the help in our fight towards equality. So that's most of what I wanted to talk about today. I want to thank Olivier for asking me to participate in your interesting debate. I'm so sorry I couldn't attend in person, but I'm really glad we came up with this video interview idea. We do have a website, gaydads.org.il. I'm afraid most of it is in Hebrew, but I'm also available on Facebook and on email. My name again is Udi LEDERGOR, and if anyone has any questions about gay fathers in Israel or LGBT rights, I'd be happy to answer. Enjoy the rest of your debate, and thank you again for having me.